This episode goes out to iTunes reviewer Megan HT. No, you're entrancing. Also, congratulations on spelling your name right. Hi there, Garrett Robinson here. Welcome to the 7th episode of the Nightblade Epic Podcast Season 3. So, we've got a bit of an announcement for you today. Sort of. It's complicated. It's like a pre-announcement. A pre-announcement. Not to be confused with pronouncement. Anyway, I'm almost done with Hellskin, the latest novel of Underrealm, and I'm very close to putting it up for pre-order. Hellskin is the third book in the Tales of the Wanderer series. And remember how I always say that the Underrealm series are all written as trilogies? It's the same thing here. With Hellskin being the third book, a bunch of story arcs resolve in a big way. My beta readers have really been loving Hellskin, which, is nice. Some of them have said it's their favorite Underrealm book so far, which is just amazing. I wish I could tell you where to go order your copy of Hellskin right now, but unfortunately, it's not available just yet. However, there is something you can do to make sure you're one of the first people to pre-order, and that's to join our email list. The Legacy Books email list is the best way to find out what we're up to. You'll receive an email on most Fridays with any new book releases, any special sales that are going on, and a reminder about this podcast, as well as anything new and exciting going on in my life. You also get a free ebook copy of Nightblade, the book you heard in Season 1, just for signing up. In case you need one more reason to join, here it is. When I first announce a new book to my email list, I usually discount it for them. So when Hellskin becomes available, you'll be able to save money by picking up your copy right away. But that's only if you're on the email list. To sign up, just go to underrealm.net/free. Get a free ebook right away and be the first to know about Hellskin when it comes out. Again, that's underrealm.net/free. Okay, now it's time for today's episode. Today, you're getting Chapter 10 of Darkfire. When we left off, Lauren was struggling to find a way to keep Jem and Annis safe while she helped Jordell stave off the coming war. Enjoy! Darkfire, Chapter 10. Nearly a week after returning to the valley floor, they passed the great mountain. There the path split again. One branch carried on straight, while the other rose into the range. Albern gave Jordell a pointed look. "Which road shall it be? You've seen the risks of the faster road, but the course is yours to choose, as always." "The faster," said Jordell without hesitation. "Rock slides cannot have blocked every path north, and the weather now is milder than it was. Mayhap we can make up for lost time." "As you say," said Albern, and he led them up. Jem accepted this new path without grumbling, for once. Mayhap he remembered Albern's chastisement the last time, or mayhap he was still too angry at Lauren to speak when she might reply. But they rode the first day in silence without trouble, and then the second, and the third. 4 days had brought them to their obstacle last time, and as the sun wound down on the fourth now, Lauren could feel relief wash through the party. It made little sense, she knew. There might well be a rock slide still ahead, just around the next twist in the path. But when they stopped to make camp, a light mood seemed to have taken hold of them all. Albern hummed a song as he removed his horse's saddlebags, while Jem and Annis spoke animatedly to each other, though still not to Lauren. But Zane did not join them in their cheer. He fared worse and worse with each passing day, and Lauren had begun to worry. He seemed little more than skin and bones now. The defiance and anger in his eyes were heavily tempered with pain. More, he seemed to be senseless much of the time. Sometimes when Jordell took him from the horse, the wizard would stare at them not with fury, but with fear. A wide-eyed, frantic terror, as though he did not know who they were or why he was bound. She drove Zane from her mind, though she thought she heard him whispering as she stood the first watch. The night was warmer than usual, and Lauren's time passed quickly. She fell asleep as soon as Albern had risen to replace her. When Jordell shook her just before dawn to wake her, she found the skies clear and a rosy glow above the mountains to the east. "A fair morning, and promise of a fair day," said Albern. "Mayhap our luck has changed at last," said Jem. Lauren wanted to warn him against boasting again, but she held her tongue. He was angry enough with her as it was. Mayhap she should have warned him, though, for not long after they started riding, Albern called them to a sudden halt. He waved them hastily to the side, and they all guided their horses to huddle against the mountain. Jordell stepped up beside him, hand on his charger's reins. "What is it?" he said in a low voice. "There are satyrs ahead," said Albern. "They have not seen us yet." They leaned out to look. There they were, smallish creatures, a few fingers shorter than Lauren, with bodies like men but legs like goats, and horns sprouting from their foreheads. At first, Lauren thought they were floating in the air. Then she saw that they were sitting on the mountainside, though she could not see how. The cliff face looked almost sheer, yet the creatures perched upon it as though it were a flat shelf. They were mayhap 10 paces above the path. Lauren quaked. "Satyrs," she whispered. "We should run." Albern looked back at her with a grim smile. "You have heard stories about them, then. Fear not, they are not so dangerous as many tales say, though it is true that they are nothing to trifle with either. They are quite quick and cunning. Thankfully they do not poison their arrows." "Will they attack us?" said Jordell, his gaze locked on the beasts. Albern tilted his head back and forth. "That is difficult to say. Sometimes satyrs will strike at travelers, and other times let them pass with nary a word. They see the mountains as their own kingdom, and dislike others passing through. But most often their mood depends upon their elders. If a satyr of honor and peace rises to power, the whole clan grows less dangerous. They will even trade with humans if they have need to. But if a young and headstrong bull takes charge, he will encourage his followers to great violence as a way of proving himself." "And are they ruled now by an honorable elder or a dangerous one?" said Jordell. "I've not been this way in many years. Last I knew, their elder was old and cautious, and bore no great ill will for men. But much can change in their clan, and quickly." "I've heard they can rip a man's heart from his chest," said Lauren, "and that they feast on children they steal from cradles in the night." "That sounds more akin to vampires," said Annis, scoffing. "Satyrs are nowhere near so fearsome. I learned much about them in my studies. Even at their worst, they are like wolves. If they are left alone or shown a sharp blade, they will leave you be. Or at least that is what I was told." "Then your teachers told you true," said Albern. "They are neither very numerous nor very dangerous. Lauren could take one easily in a fight. Their chief strength lies in their ability to traverse the mountains, for they can strike at you from a cliff face you thought was only a wall. But now we have seen them and can avoid them." "How do you mean to do that?" said Jordell. Albern's mouth twisted. "We could turn back and make for the valley floor again." "No," said Jordell quickly. "We have lost far too much time already. At this rate, I fear we shall not make Feldamar before winter, and that would be disastrous." "I thought you might say so," said Albern. "Very well. See how the cliff face leans back before forming a sort of wall beside the path? If we stay close to the mountainside as we ride past, and if we are quiet, I think we can pass them unawares." "Let us do it then, and quickly," said Jordell. "Remain silent, all of you, but be ready to fight if it should come to that. Lauren, string your bow." "I would find myself more ready if I had a blade to hand," said Jem. "Can you wield one?" said Jordell. At Jem's bashful look, he nodded. "I thought not. Come." They remained on foot, for on horseback their heads would be in full view of the creatures, and then led their horses forwards at a slow walk. Only Zane was not on his feet, for he remained slung across the back of Jordel's charger. The wizard did not move, and Lauren thought he might be sleeping. They turned one curve, which put them in view of the satyrs for a heart-stopping moment until another curve hid them from sight again.
"They could have seen us,"
hissed Lauren.
"You need not worry about that," said Albern. "Their eyesight is poor, though their ears and noses are better than ours."
Step by step they went, keeping their bodies as close to the mountain as possible. Every so often, Albern would duck his head out slightly, looking up to inspect the cliff.
"Still they have caught no sign of us," he whispered, "but do not speak until we are well past them."
Lauren's heart thundered in her chest. Despite Annis's assurances and Albern's soothing words, still she could think only of the tales she had heard in the birchwood. Parents would tell their children to return home at night, or else satyrs would find them in the woods and drag them away, never to be seen again. Of course, her own parents had never resorted to such ruses. The threat of her father's fists had been more than enough to keep Lauren from straying. The wall of rock drew ever closer as the path narrowed. Lauren felt sure the satyrs must be able to see the heads of their horses, but there was no cry of alarm. Albern had pressed himself against the rock wall now, and the rest of them followed suit. The horses seemed to catch the tension in the air, for they nickered nervously and joined their riders in hugging the cliffside. Then, without warning, Jordel's charger screamed and reared. Lauren saw Zane nearly tumble from the horse's back, but his straps held. The other mounts started and shied nervously, dancing out to the far edge of the mountain path, while the plow horse dragged Jem and Annis into view. A great keening cry erupted, a sound between a sheep's bleat and a man's battle cry, and then came the sharp click-clack of hooves on rock. With great leaps and bounds, the satyrs came flying down the mountainside. They landed hard on the pass, both ahead of and behind the party, their hairy legs bending to absorb the shock of their fall. There were 10 by Lauren's count, with 3 behind and the rest in front. The moment the satyrs landed, they began to shout with a terrible fury. Their words were garbled and alien to her, like listening to a warthog try its hand at speaking. She thought she caught some semblance of words she knew, but all of them were speaking at once. Albern's bow had flown into his hand when Lauren was not looking, and Jordel began to draw his blade. Lauren's own hand went to her dagger, but Albern threw a hand back to stop them both.
"Wait," he said. "Do not draw your weapons. We may still be able to parley."
"They do not look in a mood to talk," said Jordel, whose sword remained half out of its scabbard.
"They never do," said Albern, "and yet sometimes they will."
He turned back to the goatmen and began to speak to them. He held both his hands out in a calming gesture, though Lauren thought it less effective, as he still held his bow. Meanwhile, she snatched the reins of the plow horse and drew it farther along the path before stepping back with Midnight to put herself between the satyrs and the children.
"There now, friends," said Albern. "Calmly now, calmly. We wish you no harm. We are only travelers. Be calm and put up your weapons."
His words had little effect. If anything, Lauren thought she saw the goatmen grow more agitated. Most of them held long spears, though 2 held small bows of yew. Their arrows were little more than sharpened sticks and slightly bent. One great satyr stepped forth, shoving 2 others out of its way. He threw his head back and gave a great scream like a goat's cry, and the other satyrs fell silent. The leader fixed his beady black eyes on Albern and crossed his arms. He gave a huge grunt, and the other satyrs echoed it more quietly.
"I take you for the leader, then," said Albern. "Are you the elder? Do you command these brave warriors?"
So far, Lauren had seen nothing to show her that these creatures understood the tongue of men. But now the leader tossed his head and spoke, his voice broken and guttural.
"I am no elder. I am a warlord. I am Tiglock, son of the Lord, like my brothers here, and I know you, human."
Albern did not answer at first. Lauren had been watching the satyrs behind them, but at the bowyer's silence, she turned to glance at him. Deep concern was etched in his brows, but he quickly shook it off. "The Lord is your elder?" he said. "I have not had the honor of meeting him, but I remember you, Tiglac. You were young when last I walked this path, but now I see you have grown tall and mighty." Tiglac unfurled his arms and rolled his shoulders. Though larger than the others, he was still not quite so tall as Jordell, and his muscles were scarcely more impressive than Jem's, but he seemed to take the compliment well.
"I am mighty, more mighty than you. Humans cannot walk the mountains anymore. The Lord has told us."
Again, a shadow crossed Albern's face.
"The Lord is your elder?"
he asked again.
"The Lord is mightier than our elder. Our clan bows before the elders, but the elders bow before the Lord. All bow before him, even humans, who he says cannot walk the mountains."
"We are only passing through your lands," said Albern. "We ask no boon, and we bring our own food."
"The Lord does not care,"
said Tiglac, growing angry. Bleats sounded in his voice now, and he gripped his spear tighter.
"The Lord says no humans walk the mountains, and you are human. You will leave, or we will bring your skulls back to him."
The other satyrs gave a great shout and thrust their spears forwards, though the tips were still a few paces away. Lauren realized suddenly that the creatures were not as brave as they tried to seem. She caught them looking shiftily at each other, and then back at the party, almost as if daring each other to be the one to strike first. To her surprise, the bowyer straightened where he stood, and his hands fell to his sides.
"Do not threaten us, Tiglac. If you remember me, you remember that many in your clan fear my bow." "I do not fear you,"
roared Tiglac, throwing his fists into the sky.
"I do not fear anyone. The Lord gives our clan strength and weapons and much food. We do not fear you any longer, human."
Albern did not flinch.
"I've given you more than fair warning and much lenience, Tiglac. Stand aside now, or I will not be so kind."
Tiglac answered with a mighty shout, and then snatched one of the other satyrs by the neck to thrust him forwards. With the first one flung into the fray, the rest quickly followed, leaping to attack. In a blur of motion, Albern drew and fired. He wore his quiver on his hip, not his back, a practice Lauren had always seen as strange. But now she saw its purpose. His hand could dart down to snatch an arrow and return to the bow in the blink of an eye. He drew and fired faster than a lightning strike before fetching another. Before the satyrs reached them, he had unleashed 3 shafts, and all found their marks. 3 of the creatures fell to the ground, dead or dying. But the satyrs behind the pack were attacking as well, and Lauren turned to face them. She nearly fell over while trying to step back, long wooden spears thrusting at her face. Then a blade caught the weapons, shattering them, and Jordell stepped forwards to protect her. His sword spun in the sunlight with a dizzying flash, and he struck one of the satyrs down where she stood. The other 2 backed off, still holding the broken ends of their spears forwards. Jordell held his sword at the ready, daring the creatures to come closer. With their rear protected, Lauren ran to help Albern. With the satyrs near, he had drawn a short sword, and he used it with practiced ease to keep the creatures at bay while still holding the bow in his left hand. 3 of them tried to surround him with their spears, while Tiglac stood in the back, urging them on. But they could not breach Albern's guard, and he could not get past the long spears to reach them. Lauren snatched her new bow from Midnight's saddle and drew an arrow. After Albern's display, she felt like a child, but still she reveled in the smooth feel of the fine weapon bending in her hands. She loosed her shaft, and it struck one of the satyrs in the shoulder. The goatman fell to the ground with a cry, and the other 2 gaped. It gave Albern the moment he needed, and he dropped the sword in favor of another arrow. But he did not fire at the creatures before him. His arrow sailed between them, striking Tiglac in the leg. Tiglac staggered, bleeding in pain and fear. The other satyrs scampered back, leaving Albern an opening. He ran through it and tackled Tiglac, bearing him to the ground before lifting him back up, a sharp dagger pressed to the creature's throat.
"I pay the price of passage with Tiglac's life," he shouted. "Let us go, or he dies." "Yes," cried Tiglac. "Yes, we let you pass, I swear it." "By the moon goddess," said Albern. "Do not speak of her thus, you hairless—"
Albern tightened his arm around Tiglac's throat, and the satyr fell silent.
"I know the words. Swear it in the name of Skal, holy mother between the moons."
Tiglac did not look pleased, but he subsided.
"I swear it, in Skal's honor."
Albern waited a moment, then released his hold and shoved Tiglac away. The satyr fell to hands and knees. With a great shout, he bounded back up, and Lauren's heart leaped to her throat, but he jumped up the mountainside, leaping up the sheer cliff face like it was a ladder. The others followed, leaving their dead and wounded behind. Albern ran to retrieve his arrows from the bodies that lay all about. Lauren ran to join him, though she had only the one shaft to reclaim.
"Will the satyrs honor those words?" said Jordell. "They always have," said Albern. "But still it would be best not to tarry. Tiglac and his warriors are oath-bound now, but if their elder dislikes the promise they made, he will kill Tiglac and consider the burden released. Mount up and ride, and move with haste. If they do betray us, it will take them some time to muster the courage. We would do well to be quit of here before then."
This has been a production of Legacy Books, written and narrated by Garrett Robinson. The music in this podcast was created by Will Musser. Check out his incredible work at willmusser.com. That's WILLMUSSER.com. Today's letter is R. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.